Well, good morning, everybody. Today I want to start you off with a couple of pictures. Yesterday I got a chance to speak at the Mississippi Farm Bureau's annual meeting. It was a great meeting and met a lot of great people. But on my way home, I told my son, I was like, hey, we're going to stop in Memphis on our way home. And my goal is to beat the sunset because I want to get to the top of the Bass Pro Shop and I would like to see the river. So if you've never been here, the Bass Pro Shop in Memphis is shaped like a pyramid. And there's an observation deck at the top. And this was a picture I grabbed just as the sun was setting of the Mississippi River looking north. Okay, so the river's flowing in this direction. There's a single barge out there. He says, Dad, what are we looking for? And I said, all right, this is what I'm out here to see. You can tell how low the river is by just how much of the sand on the side of the river is being exposed right now. And we were looking at this. He says, well, why does that matter? I said, it matters because it's been difficult to get these things up and down the river, these large barges. And so we went out and watched one kind of pass right in front of us. There's only one. That's the only one that I saw that night. And then we took another picture just looking across the river from, this is now looking off to the west, of course, as the sun was setting. And we can, again, most of this is, I told him, is almost always covered by water. So it just shows us how low this massive river is. I then pulled up on my phone just to show it to him, the data. And this is what it looks like right now. So through early this morning here on Monday, we've got now the river back down to 6.6 feet below low stage. And I was thinking back about how this fall has really transpired. And so I went back to mid-September up until the other day, yesterday, excuse me. And there has been one interesting piece to this fall pattern that we've been in and now early winter. And that has been just the avoidance of moisture into parts of the Tennessee Valley, into parts of the Midwest. In fact, it got very dry here in November throughout the Midwest. But you look at this, and you see these stats showing these above average values in this part of the upper Midwest, northern plains, all the way back to the Rocky Mountains, including the Pacific Northwest. But you got to remember, a lot of that was early in the time period. We had a big system, remember, that rolled through here in October, and that's what's really biased these statistics that direction. But I do want to show you there has been improvement, and we need to understand that even though the river isn't showing the moisture just yet, remember, the soil steals it first. So if we go back to mid-September and look at the root zone soil moisture map, so down about a meter, we've got here, a pretty expansive area throughout the Midwest, upper Midwest, and all the way down through the Delta of just a very low soil moisture. Also take note of this. Back in mid-September, look how dry things were up here, I-5 corridor, coastal Washington and Oregon. Now, if we click forward to the most recent map, which was made for today, this has kind of been eaten away in places, but there are still long-standing drought issues here that just line the Mississippi Basin, and they spread right into the same area we talked about on the previous map. Where things have made a major improvement have been in the Northwest, and we continue to eat away at this issue. It is yet to really bring moisture into California, but the jet stream flow lately has been targeting, coastal Oregon and Washington, and just over the last 7 days here, we can see several areas that have been able to pick up greater than 6 inches, and we have a whole lot more rain that is on the way. There's also been quite a bit of snow that's been added up here in the Cascades. I'll show you that in a few moments. But as we look back over the last 7 days, some of the more important rains on the eastern side of the Rockies that I want to show you are down here along the Gulf Coast. Remember, Louisiana and Mississippi, two states that have better than 90% of their land area in severe to exceptional drought. So to see this heavy rain was good. Same thing through parts of Arkansas, hitting these drier stretches into parts of the Tennessee Valley. And then a section of the Midwest, if you are east or south of that line, saw some decent moisture. Same thing for parts of New England. One area that just continues to be a major concern for me going forward is this whole region here coming out of the Canadian Prairie into the northern plains of the United States. Now remember, back in September and October, this is the area that was getting the moisture, and now it has been just kind of shut off. And until we see the jet stream meander far enough north to start to target California, we're going to continue to work our way into this new water year, which began on October the 1st, as a drier overall outlook. Now, I want to show you the snowy side of this. Let's just go back over the last 3 days for that, just to show you that parts of the Cascades did pick up over 30 to 40 inches of snow at the highest elevations. Great snows for parts of the Rocky Mountains, really the whole range here from central Rockies up to the northern Rockies. And we did get some light snow that came out from the last system that rolled across the central United States, moved up toward the Great Lakes as well. Well, where's the snow going to be falling in the near term? Well, we're going to take a look at some satellite data to kind of get an idea of what's up here with this pattern. And it's pretty fascinating to watch. This is just as the sun was trying to rise east this morning, but I'm going to take you back to yesterday. We have a little shortwave sneaking through parts of Kansas and Nebraska. There's a broader one over the Great Lakes, but I want you to watch this. You see, we're going to talk a lot about this winter pattern having a strong piece of this subtropical jet. And right now it's oriented in this direction. When it reorients, if it reorients like we would expect it to, it will at some point be coming across the whole southern tier of the United States, maybe a bit more like this. When that happens, it re-engages with California, Arizona, New Mexico. It kicks off a lot of systems that come out of the panhandles or out of the Arctic region, or maybe down here in the Gulf, or maybe around Paducah, and get these systems rolling farther and farther, into the south and east. But as it stands, just looking at yesterday, these winds were absolutely screaming here. And the party's still in the northwest right now in terms of the deepest of these lows. It looks something like this on the jet stream level map. So we're watching the flow just come screaming across the Pacific, curling around a deep Gulf of Alaska trough here. And we're going to see that this ridge that it's pushing into the northwest is going to bring the temperatures up. It's going to bring the rain snow line up in the mountains, and it's going to change things around a bit compared to what we saw the last week with the rain and snow in the northwest. And here's that piece of the subtropical jet. So if you're curious what's really missing here, in my opinion, given that we are in an El Nino winter, is this subtropical jet being a bit farther to the north and maybe engaging from Hawaii, here all the way to to California. So we'll watch for that in the forecast. But this particular upper level wind configuration is giving us this in terms of the surface winds. A monstrous low here in the Gulf of Alaska. We're going to watch what the frontal boundary to the south of this does to the west, specifically the Pacific Northwest. And while that's all taking place, we're going to watch for later this week for the jet stream to kick a trough over the Rocky Mountains and have it race across the country, again, starting on the 8th, finishing on the 11th. We talked about that a lot last week. But in the meantime, take a look at how strong the winds are coming off of the mountains here. Very, very strong winds in that area. And that's why we've got these high wind watches and advisories. Now, the strong flow coming into the west, flood watches really surround much of coastal Washington, Oregon, and a big section of Washington on the whole. But we will see this rain snow line, as I said, move farther and farther up the mountains because of how mild the air is with the ridge that's kind of out ahead of this. Meanwhile, winter storm warnings have been issued for parts of New Hampshire, Vermont, and Maine. We talked about this last week, coming today for the snow. Show you what that's going to look like. Some fog elsewhere around the country here, all the way up in Minnesota, Iowa, and parts of South Dakota, and then down here in the southeast as well. And we can also see some right over here in parts of Central Valley of California. So here it is, your winds first. Let's see if I can blow that up one more time. There we go. So let's add them up from the high-res NAM. There we go. And hang on just a second. There we go. And you're going to see that we're expecting wind gusts in the plains today. I mean, this is just the next 60 hours added up, but there's going to be wind gusts in through here that are 40 to 50 miles an hour, and local topography forcing those winds to go much faster. And then notice, as that frontal boundary I mentioned a few moments ago, this guy right here lashes the the Pacific Northwest just offshore, we're looking at gale force winds exceeding gale force. We're way up here in the 60 plus mile an hour range. So some pretty strong winds right now throughout the western half of the United States. Let's go from there over to the forecast for precipitation type and intensity. Let's pick this up about 10 o'clock this morning. Now you're going to watch the frontal boundary just continue to bring the flow in this direction across the Pacific Northwest. But we have another system to be thinking about in the central part of the country and the snow in New England. So I just plugged you quickly through this evening. Let's go back and have another look at this. There's the snow flying early this morning in parts of New England. We then see a little clipper sneaking down. It's a pretty fast mover coming right down here through the plains, not producing a whole lot of snow, but locally maybe some brief but intense snow showers. That then gathers a bit of energy here when it gets over parts of Illinois. In other words, it starts to curl itself up better. That's better upper level dynamics. And so it spins up into a little tighter low by the time we get into early morning on Tuesday, and that curls through the Ohio River Valley, bringing in some light snow. Meanwhile, take a look at that frontal boundary coming into the Pacific Northwest. Well, as we play through tomorrow morning, getting out there to tomorrow afternoon and evening, we get some snow that moves into parts of the mid-Atlantic, well, really not mid-Atlantic, but more here over Ohio, Pennsylvania, a little bit into New York, and also along the Appalachian Mountains with some light rain behind it. And the Pacific Northwest is really taking the brunt of the flow coming off the Pacific as we play out here through midday on Wednesday. So that's kind of a quick look at our high-res models. Now, the upper level pattern we've been watching so carefully is beginning to evolve a bit. I want to show you some of the changes in this. So as we play through this week, okay, here is the deeper trough exiting east by Thursday into Friday. And then what we have here is a large ridge that opens up. I mean, this is a sizable ridge, major warm-up happening in the midsection of the country, midweek to the end of the week. So as one trough exits late, big ridge builds in through here, but watch what follows it. So that ridge opens things up, heat returns. This is now out there getting early in the morning on Thursday. So remember that system exits by late in the week. And then we watch this. The ensembles are bringing in a trough that now has kind of two pieces to it, one here and one here. And this is out here on the 9th. So this is coming from Friday night into Saturday morning. And we're going to watch this move through the northwest, dive into the plains, and then try to exit east. Now, if you notice, it's coming in like this. The northern piece, the southern piece is coming in like that. And they're kind of coming back together. And this was that system we talked about all week last week as showing up by the end of this week and then this upcoming weekend. It's still in the models. So that's going to be an important midweek piece to be diagnosing here in just a few moments. And then we follow it back up with something we've seen a lot of. Okay, where'd our Greenland Ridge go? It's gone. We come back into a trough sitting somewhere here in the Gulf of Alaska, and then flow that comes out of the northwest again. Now, you've heard me say this a billion times. This is convergent. That's drier. And so we kind of just see the pattern resisting, keeping southwest flow. Now, what's the difference? If we could get consistent southwest flow, we put together all the pieces I keep talking about. And if we could get southwest flow, the Mississippi Basin drought would be over. California's extended drier time period would be over. We would stop with the drier conditions that have come out of the Canadian prairie into the upper Midwest. That'd be done. The Southeast would have, unfortunately, severe weather, but a lot of rain to fill everything in. And New England would be getting big winter snowstorms. You got to get the flow out of the Southwest, and it's just not there yet. It's coming around and doing that. So I don't like this overall. I want to get the pattern turned around, and we have questions if El Nino is the right setup to make that occur, all right? So I just played you out 10 days. We're going to pick it up here in a few moments, but I got to get in and get some of the details over these next 10 days. So we got the GFS on the left and the European on the right. There's that heavy snow coming into parts of New England today, and then we're going to watch the West Coast just get lashed here with this big front. Not a whole lot happening around the rest of the country through Wednesday. But what we're watching is Thursday into Friday. Now, you saw the system through the northwest and end up right over here, coming out of Saskatchewan into Manitoba and Ontario. Same spot overall in the European, just a little bit farther to the south. That's that upper wave, the one that came out here. Now remember, I drew a second one that was going to come out down here. Now watch. As we go from Friday morning into Friday afternoon and evening, do you see the second low beginning to gather down here? This is now Saturday morning, getting into Saturday afternoon and evening, and then we play out here till Sunday, early. This is midnight Sunday. And both models are resolving a system. There's something here. The GFS faster, the European slower, as you see. The Northwest continues to get its next system coming on shore as well at this time. So this is this Sunday morning. Let's play to Sunday 6 a.m. This is now Sunday midday, and then getting into Sunday evening. So this is the lead wave exiting, the secondary wave slower on the backside, and the European is considerably slower. Now there's a lot of people that are loving that. I paused it right here, especially my friends in the Midwest are like, oh my, bring it on. Because I know some of you really love snow, and you start to see this and it looks pretty promising, but you have to be careful. This is a single model run. It's the 168-hour forecast, and it has jumped all over the place in the last several days. We know there'll be a system late this week. We've been talking about that for about 8 days now, but we don't know the exact position of this just yet. But I do want to share with you what the models are up to. Total precip, let's blow that up, there we go. This is total accumulated precipitation from the European model. Now, if I play this out here just to this is a 5-day forecast through 6 p.m. on Friday. All the action is mostly here in the Northwest. We have the snow we'll show you here in a few moments, and the first wave leaves. Much of the rest of the country, you do not have much precipitation at all coming through this week. But then we see the system emerging here on Saturday and into Sunday. And you can see that it's adding a lot from about the 100th meridian, well, a little bit farther east of that, and then shoving it into New England. You can find the drier sectors here, and in through this area as well. And that's been a constant theme in this pattern for quite some time. But let's just play this back. There we go. Let's stop it at 1 week from now and compare it to the GFS. So that's the European, that's the GFS. I like this. There is some subtle differences with the GFS being more progressive. The European on the back side of the system has more rain, whereas the GFS is farther ahead. And then you see in the Northwest, if I was in Washington, the GFS is wetter. If I was in Oregon, the European is wetter. So it's just talking about the trajectory of the system that's coming in. From here, though, let's take a look at the snow. And we're adding this up, first of all, through the next 5 days. Let's pause it right there. So notice not a whole lot of additional snow getting added into the Cascades. Again, a bit more mild. Some more in the Rockies. Here's the snow coming out of the prairie. And then you've got the heavier snows in New England. Some places here picking up 4 to 8 inches of snowfall. But as you saw, the GFS and the European do diverge on that right there, with the European lining up that snow from St. Louis up to the Quad Cities, across Madison, and all the way up here to the Mackinac Bridge. Just amazing to see that snow there. But if you're curious, that's where the GFS puts it, much farther to the east. So, it'll be an I-state battle for who gets the snow, I guess. But this is late this week into this weekend. Now, we always have to ask, are the ensembles in support? So if you watch, this would be Friday. Now notice, there's your lead wave with the low. Here's the secondary one. Now it's this one that we're counting on making all the snow somewhere here in the Midwest, possibly giving us strong to severe storms to the south. But it's really not that dynamic of a low in the ensembles. One thing is for sure is that after it goes through, the models just toss in a big area of high pressure for mid-December, which is going to dry things out. So how about some probability maps? We're going to go to the GFS ensemble first. This first map is just a chance at getting an inch of snow in the next 10 days. So now you're going, wait a minute, these probabilities are terrible. Yeah, they are, because the ensembles are not in agreement on this system this weekend. Here's your chances of getting 3 inches, and let's go all the way up to 6. So the heaviest snows are here and in New England. Now that's the GFS ensemble. How about the European ensemble? That's the probability of 6 inches in the European. So you can now see those 3 trajectories. 1 would be the Northwest, 2 here, 3 in this area. And that's, of course, ignoring the heavy snows I mentioned in parts of New England. But if we step this back down to 3 inches, okay, you're seeing a 10 to 30% chance in through here, much higher coming out of the Canadian prairie, and, of course, big snows in the west. So that's how we can kind of quickly compare the models. I want to show you one other thing, though. Let's go to the total precipitation side of this. Sorry, let's go to the probabilities. There we go. I want to show you who's really drier in this pattern. That's your next 10 days, who has a best chance at going less than a half inch of total accumulated precip. Parts of the prairie, most of the plains, and the southwest. Who's on the wetter side of this? Well, that's the best chance at grabbing an inch of liquid out of this pattern. So that kind of gets us to understand who's wettest. As you can imagine, it's always going to be the Pacific Northwest this time of year. That's the probability of getting 4 more inches of rainfall, or total accumulated precip, in the next 10 days. Very high here. Okay, where does that pattern end up, though? This is by day 10. Remember, we just diagnosed this. Don't like that setup, and that's why the models have gone over drier. Now, I'm not sure what the CPC's up to here, but the European model, I think, has the best handle on the pattern. And this is what happens when you get flow that comes over the top. We're convergent and drier here. Subtropical jet stays south, and the west is left out of the good flow. So I think this is the best representation of week 2. Hey, I got a lot more tabs to go through here because we got to start stretching this out to temperatures and then talk about what's going on beyond that. Here's today's high temperatures. Look at this, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We have high temperatures that are approaching 30 degrees above average. We're going to be knocking on the door of the 60s here. As we go from Thursday into Friday, really warm throughout much of the plains, Midwest. Getting into Saturday, this is when the system begins to gather. And Sunday, now we've got that system going. There is some colder air in this, as you saw, and our frost line gets back down into northern Florida again. Throughout much of Texas and the Central Valley of California has frost risk again as well. Pay close attention to that. When's that colder air coming? Well, let me take you back. I was watching a few things here. Here's Monday's lows this morning. It's getting into Tuesday and Wednesday. There's that real big bubble of heat that's out ahead of this next system on Thursday. But take a look down here in the south. We see, there's Thursday morning into Friday morning. That's a cool one down here, giving us the risk of frost. And as we go into Saturday morning, that's where we're going to be watching the Central Valley of California. So big heat east, much, much colder in parts of the west, especially in the Central Valley of California. But our temperature pattern overall is resisting a link to deep Arctic air. And as I play this 5-day sliding window of average temperatures out today, 5 through 10, and then beyond that, I just don't see a connection to really deep Arctic air. So to even talk about the polar vortex, remember, that thing has to align with the tropospheric polar vortex for there to be a story. And where's the connection with big ridging in Greenland or Alaska? We just don't see that. And as a result, we're missing, we're missing a big connection to drop really, really cold air. In fact, if I just show you something here, let's go to my website, agweather.com. I want to show you the GFS forecast in 5-day intervals. So I can click on temperatures. There we go. And take a look. Day 5 through 10, all the cold air is in Alaska. So when we get a setup like that, it's often very difficult to drop cold air into the U.S. Now, if you saw a bunch of warmth in Alaska and a bunch of warmth in Greenland, then it's on. We're going to be dropping much, much colder air into the central United States. But that's your day 5 through 10, day 0 through 5, 5 through 10, 10 through 15 from the GFS, just for completeness. All right, where does this all go? And then what about South America? Well, the CPC released their newest forecast for December at the end of last week on November the 30th. And I've got questions. I got questions about this area. I've got questions about the duration of the warmth, and do we really stay this wet down across the south? I think this is probably likely, but I'm not so sure that much of the Pacific Northwest gets to enjoy just a month of wetter conditions. It's certainly starting off wet, but will it last? The reason I ask that question is because of this. The MJO is sweeping out of phases 4 and 5 and is expected, I think, to end up back over here in phase 8 and 1 by the end of this month. And what that means is we're going to start to see El Niño's influence returning. Now, take a look at this. The newest Hofmüller diagrams on rising motion, they're no longer big and slanty. We start to see that over the next 2 weeks, there's this region out here, phase 8 and 1, that has the best support on rising motion. I also see during that same time period, look at this, we're starting to see more of the reds beginning to show here. And you're saying, well, what does this mean? This is how we diagnose if El Nino is going to start to really influence the pattern. These are westerly wind bursts. Now, I bring that up because if this El Nino begins to show up in a big way in late December, when it's going to reach its peak, at least late December to January, the jet will want to split over the top and come around the bottom. So that tends to leave much of the west drier, the central United States drier, but active south and active east. So that's what El Nino, if El Nino was going to be typical El Nino, would do. All right. Now that's just to finish December. Remember, last Friday I talked about what I think January, February are going to look like. This is going to be a late winter loaded winter season. That's when all the action's going to be. So I'll show you some models here. This is now the December 18th to the 24th outlook from the CFSV2 just released. Notice it's drier in the northwest. Drier in the northwest for the 25th through the 31st. It's also got the drier conditions here. Now we question, will typical El Nino subtropical jet bring moisture into California and across the south? That would be common. And by the way, these two maps, the way you look at them here, these have El Nino stamp all over them. And maybe this is just the only time this winter we really get the El Nino look. It's late December. Is there any support from other models? This is the this is the GFS extended. I don't often show you this. But as I play out here toward the end of December, okay, it's got a bit more Midwest activity, but yeah, it's hitting California. It's coming across the south. Split flow here. It's just not resulting in the drier conditions over parts of the Midwest. That's through Christmas Eve, and this plays out here to the beginning of January. All right, so that's the GFS extended. What about the European extended? Well, first of all, the European long range currently doesn't agree with its own week 2 forecast. Remember, the week 2 forecast was drier here, but the extended model says it's wetter. So there you go. Well, what is it trying to do toward the end of December? Wetter, 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 drier here, no strong signal there. And that tends to be what this model, when it bites into El Nino, does. and it's trying to give us that last week very El Nino-like pattern. So drier here, drier there, wetter and wetter. So we've got a lot to be watching, and I'm going to tell you something. I don't think the pattern's settled for this time period, but this is some of the best evidence I've got now. So to keep going from here, I got to give you some international weather update. We're going to look at some new drought data that came out from the CHIRPS data set. This is the month of November, looking at precipitation ranks over here, and then kind of a drought severity index over here on the left. So I'm seeing a lot of drought in Goiás and parts of Tocantins, and then far over here in western Mato Grosso. When we look at NDVI data, though, this is a bit baffling. If I kind of squeeze in here, look at Mato Grosso right now. Its newest data has actually got it close to average. It's even above a year ago in Mato Grosso. Goiás, another huge producing state, above where it was a year ago, near average. Come down farther south, Mato Grosso do Sul, above the normal number. So we've heard about so much stress, yet it's not showing up in vegetation health index values from space. Paraná's been wet, that's why its NDVI value is so very high. And if I add in Rio Grande do Sul to this, I gotta scroll up a little bit, sorry. There we go. It's very high as well. So that's what I've got for you. I cannot make heads or tails of this given the stories I've heard about some of the stresses in this area. What are the models doing? Well, that is not what I wanted to show you. This is the European model. We're looking at the 2-week forecast. This is week 1. Drier north, still very wet south. And as we play it forward, the European model, once we get fully into week 2, is trying to bring that moisture right back into the places that desperately need it. There it is. That's the week 2 outlook. Is there any support in this from the GFS ensemble? Let's go have a look at it. Here's the GFS ensemble, and the answer is largely no. I mean, you're looking out here, seeing much drier into week 2 compared to what the European was doing. They do agree on this. Wetter conditions here, wetter down in parts of Argentina, and that's been critical because Argentina needs the rain. So just to give you an example here, I picked off a location near Cordoba called Pilar. They've lately had some better rains. They've not made up their year-long deficits, but they've lately had a few rainfall events that have, there's 1, 2, 3 events that have been around an inch in total precipitation. So they've needed this rainfall pretty desperately. You then go from there maybe over toward, let's pick another station here around Santa Fe. There's been some better rainfall as well. Now, remember, the units changed over, so 50 millimeters there. So look at this decent rainfall they've had right around the Paraná River in this part of Argentina. And if you come way up here, farther to the north, let's pick this one right here. They are actually, if I can get it, let's try this guy. There we go. They've actually moved back above average. That's where all the flooding has been. So just thinking about that going forward, let's kind of give you some international perspective here. Still extremely wet here, halfway decent rains for Argentina, drier north initially. We also see that throughout the Panama Canal continues to be extremely dry. Our drought problems in parts of southern Africa still are there, but better rains are expected here. That's a bit of a change. Notice now parts of Western Australia and South Australia are starting to pick up better rains as the east dries out. Europe is still under the gun. There's been crazy amounts of snow that came through the Alps. We got a good picture of that the other day, just on some clearer weather. But that's kind of your 10-day outlook for global precipitation. All right, we covered a lot this Monday morning. I appreciate all of you hanging on with me, and I look forward to talking to you again tomorrow morning. We'll have new long-range outlook data midweek this week from the European model, so it would be important to cover that stuff too. All right, thanks. Have a good one.